All right, welcome to the CertLife podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Finn, and today we're going to have a couple firsts. We have our co-host, Dan Takata, and our
Hello.
very first guest, Mr. Adam West. Adam, why don't you go ahead and give us a little rundown of where you're at in the country and kind of like what you're doing currently and who you're with and all that good stuff.
Cool. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Guess that sounds so weird.
Yeah, right?
It's
So,
official.
yeah, exactly. Very first, so I'm very honored, guys. This is really cool stuff. Yeah, so I'm based out of Cincinnati, born and raised in Ohio. I mean, it's crazy to think, but almost 20 years of experience in certification world. And so I started out in 2007 ish, 2008, right when USP was going through that big, change between what you used to live with and before 2008. And then that seems so modern then, right, in 2008 with the EM and some new requirements and stuff. So that's how I got introduced into the industry from the EM perspectives. And certifiers wanted to get EM technicians going so that they can monetize on that requirement. So that's how I kind of got started in that. So yeah, and so that took me all the way through to about 2017, 2018, and I went to a consulting firm, Costango Consulting Group and Critical Point, where we taught and teach sterile compounding, aseptic technique and stuff. And my SME is coming from the EM and the certification world, which a lot of pharmacies, it's very elusive to them for some reason, and I'm not really sure as to why. Our goal has always been, and I think your guys' goal is too, is to marry that together and break down, that communication gap, and so that we can work together. And I think that that's really worked in the last 10 years. I mean, I've been doing this with them since 2017, and we've seen a huge change where, relationships have been built between board pharmacies, certifiers of all things, and of course the pharmacists and that trio, where before it was very siloed, I feel like, leading up to that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Yeah, so I met Adam on a CAG committee. That's how I think we were first introduced.
Yep.
So, Adam, for everybody out, he's like the one. I'm not super articulate, believe it or not, and I have a podcast. It's a great combination, right?
Right.
I'm a terrible writer. Pen on paper, that is not my thing. Adam, all day long, he's got the gift of all that technical stuff with writing and everything. It's like,
I appreciate that.
it's not my, that is definitely not my forte.
Well,
I'll defer all of that to Adam.
we saw a need, right? We see a need in our committee, and they were unfortunate enough to get me, right, to kind of help wordsmith some of those things together, and that was incredible too.
Oh yeah. So today, there's another first. So today is our first streaming, well, not live streaming, but our first, this is going to be the first podcast that's going to have video associated with it. We didn't even tell you that, Adam.
Man,
Look,
no. I've always been told I have a face for radio, and here you are, got me on the screen.
Yeah. Dan does not let me put any videos up before, so now we were like, okay, we'll give this a shot. We're going to expand, maybe have some other additional things.
I was actually expecting videos from the start. The last one, though, he had said beforehand, no video. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we're chatting, and I'm sitting here like looking out the window and just like, doing whatever. And then when I saw a video pop up, I was like,
but it wasn't the whole video. It was just a little clip. Just a little clip for, like, advertising purposes.
I'm sitting there picking my nose, talking about certifying clean rooms.
I got to keep our 10 listeners, our 10 subscribers, like, engaged, right? So I got to get that out.
I thought it was 13.
It's getting up there. I think we're up to 12 or 13 now. Yeah.
And growing. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I that's why I have this awesome shirt on today, because it's like the first video, right? Get everybody excited about our wonderful world of certification. But yeah, so I thought maybe today we could talk about, I don't know, testing, training. How about training? As far as technicians go, I think in my opinion, I don't want to say training's a barrier, but some of the larger firms that are out there definitely have better in-house training programs than, the
Mhm.
mom and pop smaller ones. And the training that's available to a lot of companies on the smaller end, there's stuff out there, right? I see things on LinkedIn now for some balancing training centers that are now doing some certification training. Obviously, Eagleson has always been out there. Some of the manufacturers have their own in-house training stuff. New Air, Lab Conco, all those big companies. But I still think like there's there could be more of it, right?
Oh, sure. I agree with that.
I think it's obviously in our field, we're testing a lot of different types of equipment in rooms. So there's a huge cost barrier to being able to do a lot of that stuff in house unless you're a certain size. So I think on the training end, I wish it could be a little, our field in general is fairly small, so
It's very
having
niche, that's
tons
for
of,
sure.
yeah, so having tons of training opportunities is a little challenging, um, because of the equipment or the facilities that are required in order to do some of it. Um, it would be cool to see more training for some of the younger technicians. I feel like that's would
Have you guys
definitely
seen a
help our
huge
industry.
turnaround in generations? I guess because I guess we're technically, if I had to do the math, I think we're like third gen certifiers.
Yeah, I would say that probably.
So I'm
I
sure
might be a
there's
little second to third ish, maybe.
yeah
Um, but yes, I feel like there was like the first generation. Then there was a group that was like right in front of me that were like the manager types when I
yeah
became a
yeah yeah yeah
technician. And now, yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like it's like waves, right?
yeah.
It's
Every time
just
I go to CETA, I feel older and older because these kids are just coming in. They just look younger and younger, and I'm like, I
that
remember
is
I was just like you.
that is very true, very true.
You know,
But I do feel like, and I don't know if that's necessarily just a business thing about having the some of the places that offer training, it's very expensive, right? That's another aspect that to think about. I mean, everything costs money, nothing's free,
yeah
but to send, if you just hire a guy and he's with you for a few months, it's hard to you know send him somewhere for
oh
thousands and
yeah
thousands of
that
dollars
would
to
be
go
impossible.
to
Yeah.
go do something like that. So,
Well, I
but
think
at the
talking
same
about
time,
the generation part, like our third being third, second, fourth gen, whatever, we had rules of engagement. Like you had to be in this for
hmm
6 months before you could do this. You had to be this for a year to do that. And I feel like there was even some prereqs for taking the NSF and even the CMBT. But it's like, all right, well, if you're a whiz kid and you can accelerate and learn and test back, then there
right,
really is no restriction on that. So if you had the time dedicated to a 6 month technician, maybe they could be prepared for it. I haven't trained anyone, I don't think, any faster than a year.
yeah,
That's in the trenches with them every day, on the road, and stuff like that. So I
right,
say all that because training. You kind of mentioned like the mom and pop shops and the big dogs out there, and undoubtedly they're going to have better programs and internal training and SOPs and things like that. But I feel like I've always kind of challenged the little dogs to be just as good. You know what I mean? And
oh
be
yeah,
give them that competitor's edge. When you're looking at that, because that they need it, they need it more than the big dogs. I feel like because they are kind of looked as the mom and pop.
Right.
yeah. I guess from the way that and I kind of beat this dead horse all the time on the show about our company is we do balancing as well. So sometimes our personnel already have a background prior. They're not starting from zero, so it's not always the same as hiring somebody off the street and just being like, hey, we do this weird stuff and like this is what we do and you're gonna have to pick it up from scratch from nothing. So we don't always have that challenge because we a lot of people already have a lot of airflow background and stuff like that. So we're not always starting from zero, but not everybody obviously has that luxury. Um, and yeah, I just think and I know there's companies that have done like a tier, like kind of like what you were saying about like prerequisites for like, what you're working on or whatever. And I think there are some companies that I've dealt with or talked to that have also had like a certain technicians kind of did certain things until they
Mm-hmm.
progressed enough to a next level, like
Yeah,
obviously it's
you got
not going
fume
to
hoods for
be.
the next year.
Yeah, yeah. You're the cabinet guy, all that stuff. And I do think that that's helpful too, right? You can just gain a certain set of skills, if your company has the workload to be able to do that, right? So I
It
think
helps for
that's.
career development as well,
Oh,
and moving up. You know what I mean?
yeah,
For structuring for pay, it's incentivizing to, well, if you wanna do fume hoods all your life, cool, do fume hoods. There's nothing wrong with that. But
right.
if you want to get more technical and more educated in this industry, well rounded, with just clean rooms, USP, all of that, well, then you've got to, boost your education up and improve with credentials and competencies. So, that helped me, that drove me. I have a wife and kids. I started out, early 20s with already a family, and I wanted more money. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was
Yeah.
more information, so I could climb that ladder.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know if I should have mentioned this, but I'm pretty sure between both of you, you probably could have like a cert company as large as the biggest ones out there. You
Yeah.
you guys,
How
you
many
guys
kids you
got.
have, Dan? You got four. I got six. So there we go. You got a crew of 10
guys,
already.
you guys got a small army, right? I'm coming in on the
Mm,
low end. I only got two.
there you go.
Hey, so you guys have been doing this pretty much as long as I have. I'm right at about 18, 19 years now. Have you guys noticed a difference in kind of the preference of delivery of different types of trainings, now versus when you started? Because I noticed, and I'm not sure if this is just the company I started with, but we didn't do any formal training. There was no classroom stuff. There was no, whiteboard. We didn't have any training hoods. It was all just on the job training. Like,
Yep.
like we'd show up to jobs and we'd be trained how to do BSCs on 40 BSCs. We'd be camped out at a lab for, a week or two, knock out BSCs. Big giant clean rooms with 400 filters. That's where we learned how to scan HEPAs.
You're gonna learn
So
today.
yeah, have you guys noticed anything? I've what I noticed at my last company is it seems like there was a shift. I don't know if it was just the candidates we hired, but there was more of an idea that they needed PowerPoint presentations. They needed classroom setting. They needed, exams and stuff like that. And that's not something I had, but I do see the value in it. And we did create a training program where we implemented kind of the different types of trainings and had like a big package like that. What have you guys noticed in kind of that preference?
I think, well, when I first started, the company that I was with originally had like a formal training program, right? With a classroom, had equipment and stuff like that. So you had a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, have worked at companies that don't have any formal training program where it was just like that, like an OJT type of setup, right? I think there's benefits in both. And the one thing I will say about like a classroom portion of anything is just some of that theory about what we do, right? Is it's not a job. Not that it's not a job related skill, but it's not something you necessarily use in the field. But having the knowledge is definitely very helpful when you're doing something, or dealing with your customers, or explaining why things are the way they are, or how they're working, or why they are. I don't know if I've necessarily seen it get any better or
Mm-hmm.
not. I think a lot of companies just kind of do what they've always done.
Yeah, no, that's
Everybody's
fair.
kind of on their own island. There is no, necessarily group type of thing. I mean, outside of, now CETA has like the CETA series when you go, the first couple days they have some kind of training programs and stuff like that. Or like the ones I mentioned earlier about going to like a facility. But, you know, um, CETA doesn't have any kind of training program like, like Neb has a clean room program, right? And you could go take a Neb clean room training seminar at their
Yeah, yeah.
facility that they now have. But I don't need, CETA doesn't really have anything like that at this point, as far as I know, as far as training goes. But I don't
No,
know
but
if those industry organizations, if that's helpful. Do you guys feel like if there's training put out by those industry organizations, that's helpful for like the mom and pop firms?
so if we can back up, so by far the most training that we receive as certifiers is on the job, right? I mean, in the
Absolutely.
trenches, and that's probably the most common one. Now, for me, I too came from an organization that had, a mock clean room, couple hoods. They hosted NSF classes there and all that stuff. So I was very fortunate to get, pretty good education and training from that. But along with that was the policies that, every week or 2 weeks or once a month, whenever the meeting cadence was, there'd be, who screwed what up that week before, what are we going to prevent, safety, and then we'd have a little test, and especially coming up through 2008 to 2016, there's a lot of changes between industry standards and things like that. So we were always kind of pressed to keep up with that, with learning that stuff and that material. So we would get a little test, at the end, and it didn't mean anything per se, but
Right.
you wanted to show up and show out, right? So
Yeah.
the better grades you got, the more you kind of ass kissed a little bit. But that part of that is, I think, to Brendan's point, is that this is what we've always done, and it's been good enough for now.
Right.
And I just think that's a challenge for the smaller companies, the mom and pops, if you will. And I don't mean that derogatory in any way. I'm
No.
a huge advocate for the smaller, organizations. And my desire is that they build programs like competency training matrices, SOPs, and things like that, so they can compete with the big dogs for those big, projects, and CGMP places,
Right.
and so in order to do that, you can't do what you always done, you know what I mean? And that's kind of a challenge,
Yeah.
because the people who are mom and pops, they're not just sitting back collecting dollars, they're in the trenches too. And some of them are 50, 60, and 70 years old with their cousins and their crew, you know what I mean? So
Right.
I get that they don't have time because they're just doing the same thing as everyone else, 40, 50 hours in the field, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
it's important, if you want to grow your company or establish a legacy to hand down to, your family or your son or your daughter or whoever, you have to be in this field and compete with the big dogs. And
Yeah.
there's only one way to do that. That's through training up your people and making policies and stuff like that that correlates with that. Because then you can show these prospective customers, like, yo, this is what we're about. You know what I mean? We're
Right.
small, but we're mighty. And
Yeah.
that's what I want. That's what I want for the small guy.
Yeah. And just to touch upon like something you mentioned about like the testing like that you would have done or whatever, and not really relevant to that per se, but like some of the, when your NSF test, you either have to do it every 5 or you can get an extension to 10, just like kind of like CETA gives you like a, 5, and then you can maybe you only have to do half the test if you meet requirements, but you have to do it basically, at some point. And when I first started, not even when I first started, but even when I was in this industry 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago, I'm like, oh, that's just a silly requirement, right? But now, because I just redid my sterile compounding certification with CETA, I'm taking the exam, and now that I've gone through, umpteen revisions of all these standards, I'm looking at some of the test questions, and it's stuff that I clearly know it, right? But I'm looking at it, and I'm in the answers, and I'm like, well, is this answer under the old standard or the new standard,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
3 standards ago? And it's like, I'm like,
Overthinking.
yeah, well, and just like being in industry to the point where I've been through so many revisions of standards that it's just
Oh
like
yeah.
at some point they start to get muddied, and I'm like, wait, was that the last one or is that
Right.
this one? And I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah. And to your point, some of the older standards I actually kind of like better than the revised ones. Some of
Well,
these I
yeah.
feel are a little diluted. So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I know that this is an older standard, but I think it actually is a little bit more stringent in this way, X, Y, Z. So, but
Yeah.
no,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I
remember when I
exactly.
took my CNBT for sterile compounding pharmacies. It was 2016, I believe, was the first time I took it. And I went out to New Jersey, did the whole week-long training. And the first thing Jim Wagner was saying was, it was right after, some of the proposed revisions came out. And so it was kind of up in the air, like what's going
Well,
to be in the
800 was
test.
brand new then.
Yeah, and he's like, you know what? He's like, I know that the document says this, now, and this is upcoming. He's like, all of the stuff that's going to be on this test, it's this route. So like throughout the entire training, if there was a variance in any of the specs, it'd be like, nope, we're going to go this way.
Yeah.
And so it was really confusing in 2016 trying to take that test.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
did you think the test was easy to you with all of your vast knowledge and
For me, it was funny because, like I said about my first company, it was all on the job training, like literally just, working 50, 60 hours a week constantly. Mix of pharmacies, mix of med device manufacturing, stuff like that. Whole mix of different industries. But we did do a lot of pharmacies. I had never really looked at CAG 003 that much. We had a copy in our work trucks that the technicians could look at. I glanced at 797 once or twice. I basically knew the specifications. So when I went in and did the tests, I knew, okay, pressure needs to be this between, this room and this room. It needs to be this here. These are the ISO standards for each room. So I knew all the specs, but I didn't know, what was in the pharmacy standard, CAG or USP. When I took that class out in New Jersey, that's where I got all of my like book trainings.
and it married it all together.
It married it all together.
Yeah.
So I basically spent 4 days just marrying those, just my on the ground training versus what's in the standards. And then when I took the test, it was like the easiest thing I've ever done. I finished it in like 20, 30 minutes, and I finished it so quickly. I'm sitting there looking around.
You get nervous?
Yeah,
Like, did I do something?
I'm like, shoot, I'm
You're
the
like,
first one done, and everyone's
yeah.
sitting there like scratching their heads and tapping their pencils.
You
and
check
I'm
in,
like,
make sure you didn't miss any pages. You're like, what's going on here?
Yeah. So what I always do in that situation is I'll start flipping through, and I'm like, I'm going to review my answers, and I start looking. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, no, that looks good. That looks good. Nope, I think I'm fine. I'm just going to turn this in and be done.
Yeah, I did one of my NEB clean room tests, the written portion. So I go to the testing center, and NEB had just converted over to their new. They use like a third party like testing service for that stuff, and so I showed up to the testing facility, and they do all kinds of different testing there. So I sign in, get my cube, all that stuff. They like literally make you roll up your sleeves so you don't have stuff written on your arms. It's pretty wild. But so I sit down, I'm doing the test, and I'm like, it keeps asking me, it's referring to drawings, and I clearly don't have the drawings, right? So I'm like asking them about these drawings. They're like, no, we didn't receive, anything, because it's a paper test, and they ship it out, and you do all your scheduling for that. And I'm like, how am I supposed to do this test with no drawings, right? Like there was like 17 questions, I think, on that test that referred to some mechanical drawings, and I didn't have them. I was like, this is great. Guinea pig
Was that
for the
your
first
tab test, or was it for CPT?
No, that was a clean room, a CPT one.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like I was like, oh great, I'm the guinea pig for their changeover for their first go around, right? But yeah, that was fun. I still passed, even though I'm assuming I guessed that a couple of them correctly, even though I didn't know literally what they were. But so good stuff.
I got a pretty funny story for you about taking tests. Well, first, so Nick Lasky, we were in the same room one day, taking our test. I think it was like our second or third CMBT round or whatever. And he comes in, and he's like, "Oh, Adam, I know you're trying to get that 100%." And I'm like, because I use all my time, Dan. I use it like if I've got 2 hours, I take 1 hour and 59 minutes, and just what you said, go right through everything and hit it again. But he comes in, he gives me too much credit at that point, because he was like, "You're trying to get that 100%, aren't you?" And I'm like, "I'm just trying to pass, man." Like, I take this serious. So to that point, it was my first time. I was a young guy, and I wanted to become a certification technician, because I started out as a EM guy, and I was known as the button pusher, because I just hit that buck unit, like wait 10 minutes and all the other guys. So I was like the wheelbarrow pusher for everyone. I wrote all of their paperwork for them. I was their secretary. So I was like, I want to be a technician. And so I go to my boss and I'm like, dude, make me a technician, make me a technician. He goes, I was like, I know all this stuff. I write it all down. I see it and I read it all day, every day. And he was like, all right, I'll send you to the NSF class. If you pass your first time around, we'll make you a technician. I'm like, all right, cool, bet, let's do this. And so I get through, and they just hired a guy to be a technician, which really made me mad because I've been wanting to be a technician, and this guy just walks in as a technician, right? So we're like, neck and neck the whole time competing, up to this point. We're sitting through class, and I ace the what's it where the proctor, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So
the practical.
Yeah, the practical. So I aced that, and the other guy had a couple of retests. So I was like, yeah, let's go. Like, all right. And so we take the written test, right? And I'm waiting, and my competitor guy or whatever, he's like, all right, I got my test back. I passed. And I'm like, I'm still waiting. A week goes by, and my boss's boss and the quality director calls me into the office, and I'm like, okay. They're like, we need to talk. I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting there nervous, I got my kids in my back of my mind, like, here I am, I'm getting fired. and my boss goes, well, this is the first time this has ever happened in NSF history. This has never happened before. And like, it's just reverberating in my head, like echoing, like, what is it? And I'm like, oh,
you got 0%,
100%, and the quality director's kind of smirking on the side. And I'm like, okay, just spit it out. What's going on? He goes, the proctor's lost your test. You're going to have to retake it. You're scheduled in 2 weeks. And I'm like,
oh my God.
So the statute of limitations, because the NSF proctors, he begged me to never tell this story, but I'm not giving any names and statute of limitations because it was like 15 years ago. But yeah, so I'm like 100%. He goes, they lost your test in travels, and you're going to have to retake the test. So I had to retake it. I did pass. And I did become a technician, clearly, right? So
nice. That's so funny. Oh yeah. It's do you guys? Oh, so how about this? They still do paper tests like NEB. You can, when you go take your NEB exams, they can still be on paper. The CNBT is on paper. Or did they do them on computers at all? I don't know if they do.
The NEB CPT one, the one that I just took last year, it was all laptop.
Yeah. I know.
You guys are fancy with me. I've never taken NEB.
I've never taken NSF, so I guess we're leaving.
There you go.
But do you have a preference? Is it odd? Because being older, Dan will call me a boomer. Going through school, we did everything on paper. So I actually prefer to take tests on paper even now, which is slightly odd since I don't use paper for anything ever, like at work or anything like that. But when I take a test, I still want to use paper for some reason. I guess it's like books, right? I'd rather have an actual book in my hand than read off a screen, a little tablet or Fire thing or whatever. Yeah. But
for typical tests, I prefer paper. The NEB one, it was pretty cool because it's like they give you a laptop and it literally only has an Excel workbook there in the middle of the screen that you go into. And it's basically a test report that's incomplete. And so you have to go in, they give you like testing maps, references and stuff like that. And you have to basically compile a report, but it's pretty complicated. They go through a lot of the stuff that like CETA doesn't even really touch on. So there's a lot of math involved, a lot of conversions you have to do. You have to calculate scan rates, if you're doing polystyrene latex challenge, stuff like that. So it's pretty complicated. But once you get through this workbook, it's basically like you compile a report and then you just save it and you're done.
It's interesting.
So different.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a preference, I don't guess. I mean, I cut my teeth on, NSF. So I always kind of equated down to either a Ford or Chevy guy. You know what I mean? Because
absolutely.
Way before my time, there was something else before the NSF, and like that got disbanded, or some people are still about that other organization. I don't remember what it is, but then I hear CETA's doing a version of.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Well.
That came out a week or two ago that they announced that they were going to do a safety cabinet type program as well. Yeah. That'll be interesting to see that.
Well, I think to your point, challenging CETA with training material. I don't know if they've always been very hands off because they want to provide the test, but they don't want to provide the training for the test because that would be kind of considered
And especially
collusion or
depending on,
whatever.
what the outlook is. Like I've been involved in other organizations that try to go like the ANSI route where they have ANSI accredited exams and things like that. So they also do testing, but it's like has to be like a completely separate entity. They
Yeah,
can't like there's a lot of like there needs to be a firewall where there's no muddied waters, which I mean that is the right way to do it. It's either two different organizations under the same umbrella, but they have different leadership, different everything, so it's not, it just keeps the everything kind of up to speed and up on par for being accurate and correct and all that good stuff. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see the BSE um, credentialing program that they have coming out. I feel like all the credentialing programs and testing and training, it's good for everybody. Whether it's at the end of the day, as like in the business world, it's just a matter of, well, what does your customer actually want or need? Um,
Right.
right. You
so
can hand them a bunch of
oh
certificate
yeah,
completions, and they'll just be like, "Oh, well, you look like you know what you're doing, but
yeah,
you
yeah,
know." But for me, like just the top two things, for me is to because of the EM side of things, right, and the way that the chapter has worded things and changed from 797. I'm a firm believer that any person who's performing EM has to be credentialed or have competency in showing that they're capable of doing this,
right,
and that immediately people want to think, well, that pertains to pharmacy, but what about your vendors? You know what I mean? Us,
right,
right? The certifiers. And so the two biggest things for me for training, education, and competency from a certifier's perspective is definitely the EM to show that I know what I'm doing. I know how to take these samples, not contaminate them, but then also, the CMBT as well. And I think because of the evolution of a certifier's education and training career, NSF gives you the good principles of airflow principles and all that base knowledge, and then you just bring that over to very focused USP pharmacy kind of world.
right,
It really puts that all together pretty well.
yeah,
If you have a strategic way of teaching and training your certifiers, you know what I mean. So I think that's important to give them doses, micro doses of information. And then, to Dan's point, he did it out on the field and you could do it with his eyes closed. And then once you learned all of that, on paper stuff, it's like, oh, it like just gives you a eureka moment. Like, oh, I got this. Now I understand.
yeah,
Kind of like the Mr. Miyagi, like the light on. It's like, oh, why am I doing this? Oh,
right,
okay. Got it.
yeah. Yeah, I for sure. I would definitely agree with that. And I just, it'll be interesting to see a lot of those, how the things develop from here. I haven't redone my NSF in quite a few years just because I don't have, this is probably horrible to say. I should probably just go take it, but I really don't have anybody that's asked me for it. So it's kind of fallen by the wayside and I just haven't renewed it. Um,
I Probably
and
a hot take, but I agree with you. I think they've kind of fallen off
I,
in the
and
requirements of that.
yeah, and I don't know, NSF is a huge organization. It's not like safety cabinets is like the only thing they deal with,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
for
it's a
sure.
tiny little
They're on your
fraction of
coffee
that.
pots.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Hot dog rollers, right? You see their big blue sticker at the gas station. Um, so I don't know if that's part of it, right? It's only like a small sliver, so they don't, have time to. I don't want to say that they don't upkeep the program, but I don't know if they're going out of their way to, like take it to the next step or keep it at the
If you're
top
just
or
doing a
or
bunch of
whatever.
universities or federal,
Yeah,
organizations and stuff, EPA, like they'll require that for
yeah,
sure. And I think it's a good thing, right? I mean, there are a lot of sticker lickers out there.
yeah,
You guys know that. And, I'm not saying that an NSF credited person can't be a sticker licker, but at least they have some good foundation of understanding, how these biosafety cabinets work. And if you have a Mickey Mouse certification company out there that doesn't want to be credentialed in any way and it's just word of mouth training, in
yeah,
the trenches kind of thing and no outside perspective of documents, you could not only hurt yourself but others in the
oh
long
yeah,
run. You know what I mean? And I think there's no certifier that's been in this for a year or two that doesn't have that same passion of, well, this is patient or worker, end user safety. We ensure all
right.
of these things. And I've not met anyone who doesn't take that seriously.
Yeah, I would definitely say that is true. Yeah, the But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think NSF has just been out there for so long that, like you're saying with the federal stuff or state things or different universities that require it, a lot of that's carryover, right? It's always been in the specs. It's always, it been a
Always been
requirement
in
for
that
some of those
request for
things.
proposal. Like, yep,
Yeah,
is
so
is your people?
it's
Yeah.
kind of there, right? So I think that's a challenge when a lot of these newer programs come out. Um, like CETA's going to have, if they have a BSc credentialing program, that looks like that's what they're going to be proceeding with. How did, getting that into something along those same lines is going to be challenging. Um, and I think that's the only way that any of these programs can really drive the need for them. Or, yeah, I think everybody as a technician or a company owner, everybody likes training, everybody likes having a credential. But I mean, like I was kind of gearing at earlier, is it getting recognition, or is it warranted, or somebody accepting it, or requiring it, right? That's like a big thing, right? I feel like that's how the CMBT for sterile compounding facilities really got its legs under it, was when it was started being required by, a lot of the federal agencies and stuff like that.
Well, board of pharmacies. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we're all three of us. Well, Brendan. I don't know if you're considered Midwest, but like
No.
Midwest states aren't really requiring it. Also, some do. You
Yeah.
really just get the whole Eastern Seaboard and most of Washington, California, New Mexico,
Right.
some Texas, maybe. Just depends. But from my perspective, what we do for training, we used to train board of pharmacies, and we would train pharmacists too. So I feel like my organization, for an example, there's others like me, but for my organization, we really pressed having and being trained and properly trained and well qualified. And part of that being is credentialed in CMBT.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like a lot of board of pharmacies adopted that, but especially after the NSCC tragedy, from
Right.
the New England compounding, the East Coast was like, "Yep, you have to be this
Right.
XYZ before you
Yeah.
can step foot in these facilities." And you know, there's a lot of acreage in between the East Coast and the West Coast,
Oh
and there's
yeah.
some states that require it. I think Ohio does, and but it's that's where it comes from. That's where it pushes. But I
Right.
think it's so much more local than that. I think pharmacies should actually be pressing their vendors to be working towards. Like, I don't think that you have to be, although it's nice. And I think if you guys send 2x2s, that's how our structure
Yeah.
was. You always had one person and a lackey with them,
Right.
and so you have to have the CMBT person certifying your pharmacy. The other guy can be working towards it, and that was always the key for me, is that you're working towards it. Because some people, I've known people in this industry for 30 years, as soon as they sit down to take a test, their mind just goes blank. You know
Right.
what I mean? But if you put them in front of a device or a clean room, they can do it with their eyes closed.
Oh yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and I think that's the key, is working towards it, to be credentialed eventually.
So Adam, you mentioned the variation in the stringency between West and East Coast versus what you have like Central U.S. You want to talk about culture shock? I did my first 11 years in this industry in California,
Yep. Yep.
doing pharmacies and everything, and then I moved out to Minnesota in 2017, and the steps backwards that I had to take, in how we were testing pharmacies, it was
Are you
like
trying to
these
say that
pharmacies.
Minnesota and California are very different?
In this way, absolutely. I went out my first pharmacy job with our technician who had been with this company already for a few years. So we're grabbing our equipment, and I said, "Hey, what do we use to do the smoke studies in the hood? Do we use fish pump with MSA tubes? Do you use a sea breeze, whatever?" And he's like, "Oh no, we don't do smoke studies." I was like, "Wait, what?" And then so I started having a conversation with all the pharmacy managers, even board of pharmacy out here, and it was seen as like an add-on. Like they basically took the wording that was in the chapter that said you had to do it, and they're like, "No, we did a smoke study, 5 years ago, so we're good."
Yeah.
So
No.
yeah,
That's
it was different. Now, like in the last 3-4 years, they've required it every 6 months, just like what it says in the most recent CAG. So
well. I mean, I know that California adopted the O1 to O3 well before anyone else did.
oh yeah.
As an example. But I think that'd be a great topic for the next one, Brendan, is smoke studies, because I'm finding out that a lot of a lot of organizations, certification organizations, do not even attempt smoke studies,
Really?
and it's wild to me.
That's crazy
And I
to
don't,
think about that. Like that
and I
people
honestly don't know how to
don't do it.
feel about that. I really don't know how to feel about that, because I understand where they're, because some of their stances, they're like, dude, this is a production. And,
Yeah.
some people will do it in 30 seconds. And it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to say whether you did
Yeah.
well or you didn't do well in 30 seconds.
Mhm.
Or I've seen 30 minutes, which means 30 minutes of production is 8 hours on site. And that's way more than what you would, apply to a smaller pharmacy. So it's like,
Right.
all right, well, I can't just charge you $175 for a smoke study, because if you want $175 smoke study, you're getting 30 seconds. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Right.
So I don't know how to feel about it, because we've kind of always pushed pharmacies to kind of do that in house, but collaborate with
Yes.
your certifier, because they know principles of airflow, aseptic technique. Collaborate together and work it in house, so that you can do this and teach and train your compounders. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I think
I
I'd be great. I think it'd be a great topic for
I
next
think,
time.
because we're trying to stay on training. I think honestly, you could do a whole training course on just smoke pattern
Oh,
testing
absolutely.
and like
Totally.
how to integrate that with your customers. Because I feel like I have the same mindset as you, Adam. Like, yeah, I can put smoke in the hood. I can set up all my cameras. I can do all of that stuff, but I don't know exactly the processes that these people use, and you can't have them run through every single process that they
There's
could
no
possibly
there's
do.
no
It's not
no.
feasible, right? So whether they're doing their process correctly or their steps, I don't know that. I'm not a pharmacist, right? Like that's not my
Right.
wheelhouse. Um,
Yeah.
so it does that process definitely needs to be a collaboration. And when I have customers like, well, did we pass? And I'm like, I don't know.
That's not my
Did you
place to
do
tell
it?
you.
Did you do it
That's
correctly?
not my place to tell
I mean,
you.
I can tell you whether the smoke pattern test looked good for what you were doing, kind of roughly, but at the end of the day, I think it needs to be, both parties kind of need to agree to a lot of that stuff and sit down and make sure it's done correctly.
Well, are you guys familiar with the term process verification?
As far
I don't
as
think so.
for
Okay, well,
like
that's
an
I
like an
mean,
OQ.
well, so if you're looking at the CMGP world, right, validation is the word. But when we're looking
Yeah.
at 503A traditional pharmacies,
Mhm.
validation means something completely different, and,
Right.
and almost unachievable for the standard traditional pharmacy. So process verification is close enough to what you would know as validation. And my thoughts is that that's when smoke studies should be performed. And process verification is the most complex thing. Think TPNs, think
Yeah.
multiple
Right.
multiple vials and things like that. So if, again, going back to that 30-second video, which my old organization did a bunch of those. It's like, here,
Mhm.
take a saline,
Yep.
draw whatever 20 cc's out, and I'll put smoke on it, and we're done. 45
Yeah.
seconds, right?
Right.
But that doesn't show anything, right? It shows that the PEC can deliver unidirectional airflow sweeping across the DCA and the septum, all that good stuff. And you can
Right.
say all those words, but that, to your point, did I pass? And that's not my place to tell you. I'm just showing, that this device can provide what you are looking for. How you articulate in that air is not up to me. But
Right.
when we're looking at process verification, again, a huge production, but you have pharmacy leadership, they're designated persons. That it's they're going through with all that. Most likely, probably doing media fill testing too, and then bring in the smoke.
Right.
And
Yeah.
collaborate.
Yeah.
So as smoke studies as part of certification every 6 months, no, but it should be done every 6 months according to the chapters. And then
Right.
I see people argue, well, the example given in parentheses is smoke video, for documentation. It's like, well, I can interpret that, well, that's what people want. But CAG 003 or 019 now, says that, documentation is key in video through that. So again, as part of certification, I don't think it's really achievable, because it's such an important, production and process. So I think during a pharmacy's process verification competency and
Right.
training, that's when smoke studies should be implemented in that part of it,
I
because
agree. Yeah, I agree with
that's
that.
their most complex stuff, right? And
Yeah.
and that's, to your point. Yeah.
Yeah, and like most of the 503B facilities that we service, I see they take that stuff in house, right? They have too many processes, too many people,
Right.
too many variables.
Yep.
So we don't even do that for those customers, those clients. They do that themselves because they know their process much better than we do. by any
Yep.
means.
Yeah, and
And
those
obviously
processes,
they're under,
those videos are usually a lot more scripted as well. It's like a multi-page protocol, pretty much.
Oh yeah, they've
and
leaned it out. They've leaned it
yeah,
out for sure.
yeah, and they're obviously under different, regulatory scrutiny than a, a 503A facility, but yeah, I do think that it could be handled a lot differently than just in the course of certification. Like, oh, here, quick, we got to do that too, right? And trying to get somebody to come in and fill the shoes of just kind of doing something in the hood, right? And
I've seen the 2x2s
so,
go in. He's like, what is it? The lead technician. He's like, all right, video me real quick because I can't get anyone in here. And then
right,
you see these videos and you're like, whoa, that's not how that's supposed to go.
Yeah.
So I say all that to mean this, that it's not a box to check. It's a very important process. And to your point, Brendan, to throw it together at the end of certification just to check that box.
Right.
I mean, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for us as certifiers. It's dangerous to them as our customers. And I think that's why a lot of certifiers have kind of stepped back and are like, yo, I'll certify anything all day. I'm not doing your smoke studies because, the scrutiny from Board of Pharmacy too. Board of Pharmacies have become a lot more educated on what they're looking for in the reports, in the videos and things like that. And everyone's just afraid to get under the lens of the FDA or Board of Pharmacy. So
right.
I'll say this again. I don't know how to feel about it, but I'm not mad at you if you're not doing the smoke studies. I just think that there's a better process to do it. Just no one wants to sit down and think that out. We're all busy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're always like the coyote in the hen house as certifiers anyway, you know what I mean? Because we're only there twice a year unless something breaks. And for some reason, no one ever knows we're coming. And our main contact is on vacation magically that week.
And we are the biggest inconvenience.
Yeah. It's like, can you get out of here? Can you get out of here?
Are you done
And that's dangerous. Yeah, and that's dangerous because I showed up one time and they wanted us there at 7 a.m. because they start 9 a.m. And it's like, you have 2 clean benches, 3 B2s, 3 clean room suite, and I have EM. You want me to be done in 2 hours? Not going to happen.
Yeah.
Nope.
Don't you love when you pick up, like, we pick up new customers and you bring your stuff in, they're like, what are you doing with all that? And I'm what do you mean? We're going to test your clean room. They're like, the last guy didn't have any of that stuff. And I'm like,
or what's that noise?
This is going to be fun. This is going to be a really fun job.
Yep.
But
well, and so
yeah.
What's that loud noise?
Yeah. I've actually had people say that to me before. I've seen stickers on safety cabinets that have like, it'll look like a fume hood sticker, and it says tested with a Velgrid, inflow velocity 120 feet per minute. I'm like, this is a Baker SG400. What's going on here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I got a small pharmacy out in rural Wisconsin here, I believe about 2 years ago. And the previous certifier, I guess they were no longer servicing the area. So this place reached out to my company. And we get on site, and the sticker on the laminar flow benches basically said inflow 100 feet per minute. And then it said certified on it. And I'm like, okay, inflow 100 feet per minute. Then I asked them for the certification report. The company previously had basically gone through the entire pharmacy clean room, hoods, rooms, and everything. And they tested for like trace amounts of various gases. And then they slapped a sticker on the door of the clean room that said certified. And so this pharmacy did not know any better. They basically had trace gas testing done in the air. And then a certification sticker on the facility, and they were just like, yeah, we're certified. I'm like, oh my goodness. So that stuff is out there.
Yeah.
Another idea there, Brendan. Horror stories.
Yeah. We could probably talk for hours on that one. I'm sure everybody's got plenty of that. We'll have to save that for like a live stream when people can like call in, because it'll be like for. Yeah, right. It'll be on for hours and hours and hours. But we're already at. See, we could ramble forever. We're already like. I mean, we don't have a time limit, but it gets a little long.
We're heading on 50 minutes. I mean, you're going to be in post production for a long time trying to put us all together.
That's what AI is for. I just like click a button and like let it do its thing.
Oh wow,
Adam, for being our first guest on the podcast, I got you a little something. I don't know if you can read this. Probably not.
I don't have to. I know the bottle very well.
It says It's got our the show name on here.
Oh, I can't see that. No.
It says thanks for being awesome from the CertLife podcast. So we'll get that out to you so you
Awesome,
can
man.
celebrate for the holidays. How about that?
Heck yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was good talking with you guys again. And yeah, we'll have to you'll have to come on again. We'll come up with another, topic. This show's very last minute all the time. It's like, hey, who's got time for this, or who's got, what day's good for you, right? So it's more unscripted, but that's kind of how I wanted this podcast to kind of go, right? I didn't want to, just have this long script where we knew exactly what everybody was going to kind of talk about.
Right.
Just kind of freewheeling how everything is. But it was good talking to you guys. And last time I told everybody if they had any comments, questions, concerns, or topic ideas, and then I gave out the wrong email address. So I'm going to make sure it's show, SHOW, at CertLifePodcast.com. It is not, I won't say the wrong one because that'll just confuse everybody. It's show at CertLifePodcast.com. So I got to correct this time. But yeah, thanks for coming on, gentlemen.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And we'll hopefully everybody can, this is like I said, the first video. So maybe we'll get a YouTube channel or something. I don't really know where the videos go. So we're going to figure that out too. But yeah. So hopefully everybody liked their episode today, and like, share, click, follow, whatever, subscribe, however that stuff works. But all right, guys, I will talk to you guys later. Take care.
Appreciate it. We'll see you.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye.